In today's show, we have another of our popular TNT Dynamite Conspiracy episodes, where today we talk about 9/11. What really happened?
And now, the TNT Talk Show, daring to go where other podcasts fear to tread.
Hello, I'm Tony Fasula and I share the stage with my esteemed friend and colleague, Tayo Boya. Tayo, hello, my friend. I hope you're keeping safe and well.
Yeah, what the hell, Tony? What you gonna do, eh?
Okay, I'm going to say hello, audience. Are you going to say hello to the audience?
I know if you insist. You insist.
Go on.
Hello, audience. A friend of mine was telling me the other day about how actually, this is quite serious. A friend of mine was telling me the other day how he came downstairs and found his wife dead in the kitchen, lying on the floor in the kitchen. And he was, as you can imagine, absolutely devastated, absolutely gutted. And he suddenly realized that McDonald's was open at 9 o'clock in the morning. So actually, it all turned out okay.
That's horrible. Oh, dear Lord. Let's quickly move on. These jokes are terrible. Oh dear. Anyway. In today's show, now we discuss another of our popular Dynamite Conspiracy episodes. And the topic for discussion today is 9/11. What really happened? So, Tayo, I don't know whether you want to kick things off and say what your views are on
This
the
isn't
subject.
one of mine. This is one of yours. So
I know it's one of mine, but I'd like to start off on
yeah,
what
9/11 is a bunch of terrorists took a bunch of aircraft and flew them into various places and caused a 20-year war in Afghanistan. Was that the reason they went to Afghanistan? Yes, they went looking after bin Laden. And just caused a lot of chaos because of America's ridiculous overreaction. That's it for me.
Okay, so are you totally okay with the official narrative?
Yeah, I mean, I watched planes fly into the thing, into the Twin Towers. Frankly, I don't have time for Americans and the conspiracies and everything with them. When was the last time something was not a conspiracy? The moon landings, conspiracy. The 9/11, conspiracy. JFK was a conspiracy, actually. So maybe that was a bad example.
Yeah, okay.
But everything everything is a conspiracy. It's just, it beggars belief. At some point in time, it's got to think, and some of the things I've heard, and actually, you said that you had read stuff. So I may not be as skeptical maybe at the end of this as I am now. If you can introduce me to facts and things, I'm facts and evidence kind of man. We'll see.
There's a number of stories regarding the whole episode that what causes conspiracy is because the official narrative doesn't add up. And the explanations that are then presented are scrutinized by loads of other specialists, and they too scratch their heads and go, that doesn't make sense. So you do have to question the official narrative and why does this all happen? Now, you say bin Laden arranged this group of people who came in and blah, blah, blah.
Americans say that, I don't say that.
Well, initially there was an actual recording which came out, supposed to be bin Laden, I can't say the word, where he actually denied the whole thing. He said it wasn't me.
Yeah, I do remember.
Exactly. And then subsequently, a few years later, another video, supposedly him again, said that he did do it.
No, what he said is, no. I watched that video too. What he said is, look, if they want to pin the rap on me, I'm happy to take the rap. That's what he said. So if they're going to pin it on me, he's already said I didn't do it. He said I had nothing to do with it. But if you want to pin it up on me, hey, I attacked America and I did all that to America, fine, go ahead. Okay, fine. That's what he said.
See, for someone to be the mastermind of the whole thing, would you have not thought he would have gloated a bit more and made a point that, look what I did to the, your words, indomitable, can't even say it, Americans, and he would have taken great pride in being the architect and ownership of that whole episode, but he didn't. So straight away, if he's claiming he didn't do it, then who did?
Well, who did? Well, the terrorists who were involved. What Al Qaeda translates to the base. In English, it's the base. And the base is an ideological, I don't want to use for base, but again, because it's an ideological foundation. And you can sign on to the base, so to speak, merely by fighting its wars in its name. Okay. Do you see?
Yeah.
And that's how it spreads. So it is not as if bin Laden was at the center of everything that was happening. It was just that there's this ideology, and if you're part and parcel of that ideology and you act in a way which is consistent with that ideology, you can claim to be part of the base, you can claim to be Al Qaeda too. And the people who flew into the, who instigated, who performed, who, whatever the word I'm looking for is, who did, which is a terrible word, did 9/11, who were guilty of 9/11, they were acting in the name of the base of Al Qaeda.
Okay, so then the question also is asked: then, if it wasn't him, who was it? Who was the puppet master?
Well, if you want to think about puppet master, but I'd rather go for the financier. And as far as we understand, look, Al Qaeda is a Wahhabist extremist. Probably the two things are quite synonymous anyway. If for audience members who don't know, the Wahhabis are a sect, Islamic sect, and they are quite extreme. Now, not all of them, of course, are terrorists. I don't want to say that, but statistically speaking, an uncommon number of terrorists are Wahhabists, if you see what I mean. And there are a lot of very powerful and very rich sheikhs in Saudi Arabia who are Wahhabists and who are quite happy to fund these things. And that's the pool of people that you look into for the funding, because the actual planning wasn't really professional or that great. Don't forget that one thing that should have sparked attention and didn't was one of the eventual pilots who needed training. He needed training very quickly, and if you recall, what should have sparked the attention and made somebody think what's going on here is he only wanted to know how to take off and fly. He wasn't really interested in landing. Yeah, so that's not the sign of a well-planned operation, and it was a bit, gung-ho, that kind of thing. And when I say gung-ho, I mean just seat of your pants kind of thing, which is an unfortunate metaphor in this case. Seat of pants planning and stuff. And it happened to work out in what is it? The majority of the cases, I think 4 out of the 5 attacks were successful. But that was, if you like, down to maybe just sheer luck, in a sense. It wasn't masterful master planning or anything like that. It was somebody funded a small group of extremists who slipped through the cracks because they were small, because they weren't connected to the real terrorist network, and that's why they're able to get away with it.
I mean, overall there was 19 people, but there are some really odd things about the whole event. Now, obviously, we know the planes hit the Twin Towers, but what we have a problem with is how could planes hitting towers bring them down in the manner that they came down? Because there's reports saying that the jet fuel itself can't get to temperatures hot enough to melt steel. And excuse me, the fabrication of the buildings, if you have something that hits a building, and one side will inherently become weaker. So, excuse me, my cough here. The building would then topple towards the weakness. You wouldn't get it on the other side. But what happened? The buildings collapsed onto themselves.
Concertinaed.
Yeah, which doesn't actually make sense. The
Okay. Let's deal with your objections one at a time. First of all, the temperature of the fuel burns and steel melts. You are correct. Nobody is saying that that's not the case. We are people like me, skeptics like me, will say, yeah, that is the case. It's very true. Fuel burns at 1,400 degrees or thereabouts degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. Sorry, Americans.
Yeah.
Come on, Americans, get with the program. Everybody says Celsius. And the other thing is that the steel melts about 2,600 or something degrees. Yeah. So there's a huge gap between the two. However, there's a big however, steel buckles at lower temperatures. Steel buckles at temperatures of 1,300 degrees Celsius, which is lower than 1,400 degrees that fuel burns. So, as someone said, if you look at one of the Twin Towers, I don't know which particular one it was that I saw in the video I watched, the weight of the building on top of the damage was the same as the fully loaded Titanic. And obviously, if steel is buckling and collapses, then it's not going to sustain it, and there's going to be an pressure sufficient to cause a catastrophic failure of the pillars. So that's what happened there. No one is saying that the steel melted and it was the melted steel collapsed. No, the steel buckled sufficiently, was sufficiently weakened, and there was sufficient weight on top of the weakened pillars to cause a collapse. Now, as for the concertina effect, as you said, you would have expected it to fall down in just one direction. Apparently, the spread of the explosion spread the fuel and the damage quite co-equally, so that in fact it was damaged equally on all. From if you did a cross section and you looked at the cross section, you would find that the damage was, because of the way the plane exploded, was actually co-equal and weakened sufficiently everything in such a way and such a manner as to bring the building down on top of itself. And the building was well designed, by the way. It was so well designed that the effects of what they expected would have been a problem, which was an earthquake in a high wind. That was what it was designed to withstand, an earthquake in a high wind.
Yeah, and not to fall down.
And not to fall down.
Mm-hmm.
So it was so well designed that actually it came down as it would have been expected to come down eventually one day in the far future, when engineers would have brought it down in a controlled explosion.
That logic you could maybe attach to a plane hitting one building and you get those effects. It just so happened that the way that the fire burned brought the building down in this uniform manner. But for 3 buildings to fall exactly the same?
No, one didn't. The one where it went in at the edge. The one where it went in the corner, it's almost missed, went in the corner. I don't know which one is the South Tower and the North Tower.
Both towers collapsed exactly the same.
No, one. Okay? No. I remember seeing one. Where one side seemed to go. In fact, if you look at if you look at even the after pictures, there's one of the buildings with one side of it, not intact, but standing tall.
No, they both imploded on themselves.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying they didn't implode them themselves. Okay. I'm saying the way that one was like this, like if I can look at the camera and like that, twing, 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 like that, right?
Yeah, pinging down on itself.
One did sort of like I can't do it. I'm looking. Unfortunately, audience,
the benefit for our listeners, because obviously they can't see your hands as you're doing. They can't see
my hands, right? Okay. For those who are watching the video, the video reverses the image, and I can't. I'm not doing what I want to do with my hands, which is to say that this side comes down.
Yeah.
Right, and then this follows, and it sort of went. That's terrible.
That isn't exactly how it works.
It isn't because I can't do it. I'm trying to explain.
For the benefit of our listeners, Tayo is trying to justify how it came down in stages where one is above another, and
that's not actually how it came down. It's rumbling or tumbling.
If you actually
tumbled.
If you actually saw the building, and if you go on YouTube and do a search of the 9/11 building collapses, you will see them all. Can you not hear me? Can you hear me? What's happened here? Can you hear me?
Oh, you're back. But there was about 1 minute when I couldn't hear you.
Oh, really?
Then you said you actually saw, and that's the last I heard.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Okay, we'll assume that we're okay still.
I can hear you now.
Cool. I don't know whether it was at your end or our listeners couldn't hear either. Okay, that's interesting. Anyway, the buildings did come down in a domino effect on themselves, which is the first time in history that happens without a controlled explosion. Also, are you aware, which is not even documented, by Building 7?
Mm-hmm.
Building 7 was within the World Trade Center complex and wasn't hit by a plane. So you couldn't even use the reasoning of jet fuel that created the intense temperature that melted the steel frames or caused them to buckle, and then they all simultaneously buckled at the same time in order to collapse in a straight line, which sounds completely far-fetched, as you can imagine. Building 7 didn't even get hit by anything, but still collapsed in the same manner.
Apart from debris.
Well, a debris, again, would not cause a fire hot enough to buckle steel reinforced pillars. It just wouldn't. And secondly, had there been a fire, the building would have remained upright, not collapsed on itself.
No, who says that? No. Okay, no. You said two things. So thing number one, you said fire would not have caused Building 7 to collapse. Who is saying that fire caused Building 7 to collapse? I've heard that rubble and catastrophic failure caused Building 7 to collapse. I'm not hearing that anybody said there was a fire that caused it to collapse. I've only heard that from you.
The thing is, the building collapsed, and if a fire caused Building 7 to collapse, it would be the first ever fire-induced collapse of a steel-framed high-rise in the history of buildings.
So nobody's saying that. Who's saying there was fire? I've heard it was rubble. I'm not hearing that it was fire. I'm hearing that it was the rubble from the nearest, or I don't know which, whatever.
It was from the FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, said that it was a fire that had got into the building that caused it to collapse.
Okay,
so it was close enough to the Twin Towers as part of the same complex.
So what was it? An exploding engine, a fuel tank? What happened? How did it go from A to B? What did FEMA say? They're not idiots. I mean, if they're going to say it's fire and no plane hit it, obviously, I mean, they went to school. They must have known that people were going to be like, hang on a sec. So what did FEMA say about it? Where did this fire come from?
Fire from the two other buildings went onto this one and caused it to become unstable.
Oh, all right. So why is that so unbelievable?
Because it's almost impossible.
Almost, but not quite.
Well, it is
Right
impossible.
wind
then.
conditions,
Okay.
maybe.
What, again?
So wind. Was it a windy day? I don't know. What's the story? I need to see some of these videos, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And what I'll do, I'll share them to you and see what you think. But the collapse of the building itself. Have you heard of? There's a group. There's 1,700 engineers and architects.
Yeah, I've just listened to somebody just making extreme fun of them for their lack of scientific knowledge. And I'm sure I'm waiting for you to mention something.
For the fact that they are engineers and architects.
Hey, scientists believe in evolution. Don't talk to me about idiots who've got degrees.
Okay. So you yourself are somebody who doesn't believe the Americans anyway, but you're happy to believe this coming from them.
No, I just like facts and evidence. I'm willing to join anything, but when I look at the debunking videos, I'm completely satisfied that they successfully debunked the conspiracy theories. Now, if I wasn't completely satisfied, I'd be on your side of the divide. I don't have a dog in the fight. I don't, if it was a conspiracy, it was a conspiracy. What has it got to do with me? But this building 7, I understood from the defense I heard of it. The people debunking it never mentioned anything about a fire. They did say it was from the falling debris that caused the building to collapse. And apparently it's the same idea that it wasn't the steel. It wasn't caused because the collapse of these buildings didn't happen because the steel failed. It happened because the steel buckled. There's a difference.
If steel buckles, how think a bit logically, right? Mm-hmm. Steel buckles all in the same corners of the building. You got 4 corners of the building and 1 in the middle. How could it all buckle at the same time?
Because one goes.
Yeah, but if one goes, it would tip. I get what you're saying. Yeah. It would tip. Because that's where the weakness is. The other 3 would remain intact. So you would get a lopsided effect and then the building would fall. If they fell that way, done, would make sense. Then there would be no conspiracy. The fact that they all fell onto themselves, think about it logically as well. Why would a building land on itself, which is the hardest bit? You'd land on a bit that was not there, the least resistance part. So if you're tipping, you tip outside, because outside there's nothing to stop you falling. Why would you land on yourself? It doesn't make sense. That's a controlled explosion.
Okay,
bring it in the same path.
Well, what also doesn't make sense is their conspiracy that you're going to bring down a building, but you're going to bring it down in a controlled fashion instead of just blowing it up like a proper terrorist would.
Blowing it up like a terrorist would, then you'd have to say, how did the terrorists get the explosions?
Well, what I mean is, if you said that the plane hit the building and the building fell down and yada yada, why would you blow it up in a controlled fashion? How does that make sense?
Because
when you're doing your planning, if you're a master planner, why would you do that and have it continue down itself? How does that make any sense?
I don't know. I'm not saying I'm. It doesn't make sense logically. So you question it. You question, how is it possible that the buildings collapsed in this manner? It doesn't make sense. And if someone can explain to me the physics of why it would happen, and it's corroborated by everybody going, yeah, that would make sense. But you've got so many people who are specialists in this field who say that's impossible. Number one, for them to buckle all at the same time and the weight from above come down in a uniform manner, you get discrepancies. So it would tip. And had it tipped, we wouldn't have this discussion.
You see, my problem is, I'm looking at the video now. I'm going to send you the link to it. And it's building 7 and it's doing exactly what I said. I don't know why he said it didn't. One side is noticeably going down before the other. And I've just sent you the video. We're going to post it on... You're sending me one too. People exchanging links everywhere. We're going to post it on our Facebook page and everything for the audience, so don't panic. Both links will be on our Facebook page when we publish this episode. So you can have a quick look at. I put mine on silent just to have a quick look at it.
Yeah, I'm having a quick look at it, and that's a demolished
Do you,
building.
do you see one side? Do you see the what would to us be the left side? I don't know where east or west is.
That's a demolished building.
So okay, so do you know what this is? This is a fantastic example of two people looking at exactly the same thing and each one reaching different conclusions. Because I'm seeing the left-hand side going down first, dragging the right-hand side with it. That's what I'm seeing. Sorry?
It's impossible.
No, it might be impossible, but that's what I'm looking at. That's what I'm seeing. And you're saying that it's going down at the same speed.
But there's hardly any difference. Right. If they were coming down at the same, at one drags the other, there would be, you'd get things falling at different sides. If you've ever seen, I went and actually had a look at several videos of buildings collapsing outside of this, just general ones, and those that were controlled explosion. I actually did a bit of the controlled explosion ones, identical to the building in the World Trade Center. Identical. You can see that they come down on themselves. All the others that fall or be damaged in some way by fire, whatever, tip. They all tip in a way that never falls on itself, ever. So why is it three buildings in, can you still hear me?
No, it's not that. So I'm looking at your video, and it's from a different angle, and it's giving me a different perspective, which is straight. You know, the video I sent you has got a different perspective. The one you sent me does appear to show a concertina effect. So it seems to be a question of where you're looking at it from. What I'm looking at here, the one you showed me, if that was the only video I'd seen, I'd be like, that's a concertina. That's a controlled explosion. But the video I sent you was from a different perspective. You see something different. So could it be that it's how you look at it? Because yeah, honestly, the one you sent, I'd be like, that's really odd. But that's the back of it or something. Who knows what side it is? The one I sent you has got a different. It's different.
Did you know as well that the media stations reported Building 7 falling before it had fallen?
All of them? Oh, okay, some of them, I don't know. No, I didn't. The answer to your question is I didn't.
Yeah, even the BBC reported, and if you have a look at the article that I've sent you further down, the BBC show a report of Building 7 falling, but you can clearly see behind the reporter that the building is still standing. That's like,
had any of the blocks fallen at that stage?
No.
Not a single, not, you know.
On Building 7, no, it hadn't collapsed because
what about one of the others? What about the other two, the Twin Towers?
The Twin Towers had fallen.
Is it possible that the reporter didn't know what the heck she was talking about? This is the BBC after all. So could she have thought that Building 7 was one of the two towers which had already collapsed? I don't think she could have been that
stupid, but yeah, you could use that. BBC. You could put that as a, you know, as a defense. But yeah, to me, that sounds rather daft. When
until I started looking into this for this episode, I didn't even know there was a Building 7. That's me, Tayo. I didn't even know there was a Building 7. I thought it was just the two towers that fell. I heard kind of like a third building was affected somehow. I didn't know it collapsed. And I didn't know its name.
Yeah, Building 7.
I just thought it was affected.
No, Building 7.
So she was on the spot. She was there. She was, you know, this horror was going on around her and everything. I'm talking about this BBC reporter. There's a horrible, you know, situation going on around her.
And CNN the same.
Well, birds of a feather, man, you know.
Well, that then would lead that they've both been told, by the way, Building 7 has collapsed.
Or
they reported it and it hadn't.
Yes, that's one possibility. The other possibility is they're both a bunch of assholes, if you don't mind my saying, which is my actual belief in them. So, as you know, I don't respect either organization. So, not impressed by that. I think for the day and for the morning, I kind of remember the morning. I was in Nigeria at the time, and I just walked into my friend's office. He had a TV in his office, and I said, "Have you seen this?" And I was like, "What am I looking at here?" And just the shock, you know, the first one, we were seeing replays of the first one, And we're talking about it. So, what kind of weird accident? Couldn't the guy see,
Yeah.
and avoid it? It was like, because we thought it was a plane crash.
Yeah,
And we're talking
exactly.
about
Yeah.
it, and then the second one hits. And we're
I
going,
know.
what the heck is going on?
Yeah, exactly.
And
That
at
was
that
the
moment,
one.
like, what the heck is going on? I think that is when the panic actually started taking
Yeah,
place. Because at
exactly.
that point, we don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And if you're a reporter, you're standing there, you're getting news, and people are talking into your ear and everything. And I think there was even one where I remember one reporter where the studio was furiously shrieking at the reporter, and I think it was a woman. I'm not entirely sure, to turn around because something was happening behind her. She wasn't even aware of it. It was like, turn around, for God's sakes, turn around.
Look, yeah.
And she was missing all these things that's going on behind her. It was chaos that morning. So if she didn't know where exactly where Building 7 was, I wouldn't be surprised.
I mean, you're right. The BBC footage and the CNN footage, which appears to describe the building collapse way before it actually did, could be miscommunication. Seems rather odd, mind you, but it is odd that both of them reported that it had collapsed. What is also interesting is, did you know what was housed in Building 7?
No.
Building 7 happened to be a FBI building with government information, CIA building as well. And yeah, it just seems a little too coincidental that the Building 7 was a security building and it happened to fall down, and without any sort of any sort of real impact of anything, come down in a strategic fashion. And yeah, and it's the building that belongs to the security services, and they lost a lot of information.
Okay, so first of all, why would losing a building mean that you've lost all your information? I mean, I was a programmer, but I had a lot of expensive software that I built up a library of pretty expensive software that would have cost thousands of pounds to replace. So I created images of my disks, and
sensibly, that's what you would do.
I left a duplicate discs in a flat in my parents' flat in London. So that's just me. So think about the FBI. You got all the sensitive information. Are you really going to entrust it in the servers in one place, or are you going to put it on a distributed network for resilience?
You'd have thought so, even in 2001.
How could they have lost? Oh, everybody, even IBM. I mean, Microsoft from the 80s, IBM from the 70s, the 60s. Everybody, you would distribute your data center. You know what's going to have it in one place. You're thinking about a cloud. I'm not thinking about a cloud. I'm thinking about replicates.
Just old school backups that
old school backup. You're going to have remote backups.
Yeah, off premises.
You can't put everything in one place. What about a proper war? Never mind, terrorist attack. Are you going to lose everything because you went to war with Russia or USSR or whatever, and they bomb New York, and that's that? You've lost everything? Of course not. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And then again, FBI, they do everything from international terrorism, which is weird because they're supposed to be, maybe not weird, but they do everything from international terrorism to serial killers to child molesters to whatever. So what exactly even was going on in that building? Could have been not anything to do with terrorism and so on and so forth. It could just have been the people who look into forgery of treasury. No, that's ATC. That's somebody else in America. Sorry, that's
yeah. America, we don't know what was in the building. We don't know, but we know it's a government building. I'm not saying otherwise. It just seems rather coincidental.
Could be salaries, where they work out the salaries. Maybe that's why I've said the FBI. Everybody got paid late that month or something.
It just seemed really odd. And
I think you're reaching that, darling.
No.
Anyway, like I said, if I had seen only the video that you sent me, I'd have questions. Fortunately, I stumbled on the right period to confirm my confirmation bias.
Okay. Do you also know that when the building, it was actually recorded by one of the One of the guys on, I think it was NBC or whoever, the this made me laugh when I saw it as well. The hijackers who were named, they were said first off they were alive, but obviously they could have got the names wrong. But what they did say was they found the hijackers' passports in the rubble.
Yeah.
Now,
I thought that was amazing.
What did you believe that?
No,
seriously?
I thought it was amazing because the building came down, and then they were searching through the rubble, and then they found the passport, and I thought, of all the things to survive. To survive this explosion of fire and rubble and everything, that's amazing. But look, life does amazing things. If you just found one passport of one hijacker, I'll go, I don't know, was it just the one passport?
They found one, yes.
Yeah, it's like, well, that's quite a coincidence. But then there are tremendous coincidences that we can, if you look into, if you do an internet search for weird coincidences, there are some pretty fantastic coincidences out there. Indeed. So I'm prepared to believe that there's one, which was really weird.
Also, what is interesting is,
kind of unbelievable.
Why? Number one, you're going to do if you're going to choose to hijack a plane, you're going to bring your passport, are you?
You have to get onto the plane. Remember, they got on as passengers. So, yeah, you do.
No, because they didn't check passports back then on domestic flights.
Was it? Oh, there were domestic flights.
Of course there were domestic flights. There weren't international flights.
All right.
So, number one, why
they didn't check passports back then, right?
No. You could catch a plane, a domestic flight plane, just by giving your name or whatever. They didn't check anything. Why would they? Why? You only need a passport for international travel. You don't need it for domestic travel. Now they've introduced stronger checks. But prior to that, no, you could queue up for a plane and be on standby for when the next one's available. And also, why would a terrorist carry his passport when he's hijacking a plane? And then the only thing... I
suppose you'd expect it to be destroyed in the...
You would have thought so, seeing as it was, as you actually said...
You really wouldn't want to leave it behind at the hotel, would you?
Would it matter? You're a suicide bomber.
Yeah, well, whatever evidence you can take with you and make life harder for the investigators would be better. So if you take
why then would this passport survive the explosion? It was
it shouldn't have.
Well, exactly.
So
that then
you'd expect it to be destroyed. So
of course
he took it along.
It's paper.
Yeah, that's why he took it along. He expected it to be destroyed rather than, or maybe could have destroyed it back at the hotel himself. Probably would have been a better option, but you never know. If somebody stops you, you just got your passport, can you identify yourself? Here it is, sort of thing. Then you get onto the plane, and then you have other issues to.
I mean, how could the passports of the terrorists survive the explosion?
Only one terrorist, not of the terrorists. You said only one.
Well, yes. How did it survive the explosion when everything else got obliterated? That it was hot enough to melt steel and buckle a building, and the terrorists would have the passport survived that. Also, there is evidence
that speaks more to the ultimate conspiracy that this entire world of ours is a simulation, and the passport had to survive for the narrative. That's an even bigger conspiracy than your piffling little conspiracy. When Tyre comes up with conspiracies, it's the big one.
The big one. We're not even here. This is all a joke. Okay.
Yeah.
There were a number of things as well. There was questions about the cell phone calls that were made from the airplanes. Number one, there was issue regarding how did they get signal up there? Because normally, even on a domestic flight, you're flying high enough away that you can't make calls from up there. Whether you can or you can't, I don't know. And it's just odd. So that's just a question mark.
How did the mother, I don't know if I can remember her name. I saw her today. It was something. Robbins or something like that, so like Lee Lee or BB or DD, one of those names where you've got three letters repeated in the same name as a first name. So like
Yeah.
Lee Lee, and then her surname was like something like Robinson, or the typical sort of Black American, African American kind of surname, Johnson, Robinson,
Yeah,
something
yeah,
like
yeah.
that. Well, I actually heard her rather haunting message to her children, saying that she didn't think she was going to make it and she loved them and so on and so forth. That was the plane that was landed in Pennsylvania, the hero plane or whatever.
Mm.
Um,
There was one particular call which was rather strange. There was a phone call from a son to his mother,
mhm.
and he referred to himself by his own first and last name. When you're calling your mum, I don't see the point of that, but that was rather odd. But clearly, we can't say
So was
anything.
that a recording into? I can't remember what. I don't think phones that in those days were even that sophisticated. They even have like recordings that you could leave yourself, like
Yeah,
on
yeah, yeah. Voice message. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You could.
that you could leave
You could leave a
on the
voice
phone.
message. Yeah, yeah. You could. Yeah.
Not leave where you're calling, live on the phone itself. You record, make a recording is what
Oh
I'm saying.
no,
Now you can
no,
make
no, no,
recordings.
no, no. You
So,
couldn't. He'd have to have
so
made the call, and the call was on the recipient, the mother's message. Or I don't know. Actually, that's a really good one,
mhm.
because how did they play that back? How did that even get recorded?
Yeah, exactly. So are you saying that he left a message on his mother's recording machine? In which case, identifying yourself by first name and last name, that would be really peculiar, even if you are under stress. I can't imagine me in those days phoning up my mom and saying, "This is Tayo Boya." That would just be what?
Yeah,
Hi, mom. This is
yeah,
is
exactly.
basically
Yeah,
what people would say. It's me.
yeah.
Who
It's
else?
me.
Who was
Yeah, who's me? You can recognize your voice. See, that's a bit odd in itself, but
very odd.
that's not a big,
But
smoking gun.
but
It's
the
a bit
reason I'm
odd.
bringing up is the recording. But if I had a phone in my hand and I thought I was going to die, and that maybe this phone would be discovered, if it does survive, would it even be near me? And I want
Right.
people to know who it was. Then I could leave my name, my first and last name. I could say, "This is Tayo Boya," because I'm leaving a message on a device that would not necessarily be identified as being me. That might not
Yeah,
even know
yeah, yeah,
it's my body.
yeah.
And then it makes sense. That's what I'm saying.
I'm not sure that that is how it was. I think it was more to do with there were calls directly to their loved ones from the plane. But I'm not so sure. I think that if that happened, that actually was genuine rather than fake. But I'm mentioning it anyway. What was also strange was that there's some conspiracy people believe that there's been a tip off that something was going to happen on the 11th.
Mm.
And a lot of Jewish people in particular were informed. And
Yeah.
so there was over 4,000 Jewish people took time off on the 11th. That was rather high. Some Jewish people still died, of course, but it
The
could
ones
have been
nobody
even
likes,
worse. Sorry?
Don't tell Moisha on the third floor.
But this would seem to indicate a sort of a tip off. It just seemed rather strange. They were told to take time off. It didn't say why. Just take time off. Don't turn up.
I didn't have time to watch the debunking video for this. There is
Hmm.
one that debunks the notion.
Yeah, I mean, all these
I'd
are
wonder if
circumstantial. They're not, smoking guns. And I'm
well,
a bit
basically
wary of
if the
these.
Jews had been if the Jews had been tipped off, would that mean that it was a Jewish conspiracy?
Mossad, there's
Okay,
rumor of that.
so why
Yes,
would Mossad attack Israel's best supporter?
because they knew that they would then take arms against the Muslim world and pin it on the Muslims.
Well, how's that worked out? Not
No,
very
no,
well.
I'm not saying that is the truth. I'm just repeating what some of the conspiracy theories regarding this are. I don't personally believe that, although there's rumor on it about the owners of the Twin Towers are Jewish and they insured it earlier in the year in case of, attack, damage, or what have you, which seemed rather strange because they got quite a handsome payout from it.
So in the year
But that
2000, early in the year 2000, they insured the Twin Towers against the terrorist attack,
yeah,
and 4,000 Jews didn't show up, and nobody is picking up the Jews and asking serious questions.
indeed.
And that seems to be, I mean, if there is something to, if I'm taking anything away from you, is that there's an awful lot of Jewish people running around who probably need to come in and have a chat with, with the security people.
I'm not sure that tip-off thing is. I think that could be a coincidence.
Was it Hanukkah? Was it obvious? It was a Jewish holiday or some sort?
No, September the 11th. No.
Well, then I don't know.
Weird.
So, okay, I'm going to look into this and come back to you because I did see that there are videos debunking this.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you could ask how many people didn't show up to work that day, and can you make subsets that are equally as impressive?
I don't think there are. I mean, obviously, with that number of people in those buildings, you're going to get, because you've got thousands and thousands of people, there's going to be a huge number per day that don't go for very.
A whole bunch of white people didn't show up, for instance.
Yeah,
a whole bunch of black people didn't show up. So it's like, could you do that? You know how you can pick? You can get a random set of people and get fined contingent. I don't want to use contingent. And yet find confluences, if you like. This is a bad word. Find confluences between amongst them.
Yeah.
People are saying birthday, which would be kind of weird, and you have an unusually high number of people with this particular birthday. So I don't know, but I don't know what the answer is. I think it is an interesting. If you marry that up to the heightened insurance against terrorism earlier in the year, then that becomes the first thing you've told me, which I find interesting. And for you and for me, that's the TNT talk show's code for maybe there's something there. When we say, well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's as far as we're prepared to go to say, well, perhaps there's something.
I mean, these are all conspiracies, but I mean, the one about the buildings is one that got me as well. Again, commercial airlines, their frames are light aluminium, basically, and so that they're easier to fly. And could a plane do as much damage to the Twin Towers as it did? It doesn't make sense that in relation to the size of the towers, even a 747, which is fairly big, but these towers are huge.
I think 747s, I remember reading, just not even 2 days ago, I was watching what's it called now? Pathway to Disaster or something. It's a series on YouTube, which deals with plane crashes, things like that, and describes the sequence of events leading up to the disaster.
Yeah,
I was really shocked. I believe that the weight of a fully loaded 747 is something pretty amazing. I thought it was like 30 tons or.
No, it's huge. It's 600 like, tons or something.
I think 325. Sorry, no, how was it? Or 420,000 kilograms. So that's 412. Basically, that's 412 tons. Tons in SI units.
Yeah.
So 400-ton unit of anything traveling at maybe 400 or 500 kilometers per hour, slams into a building. Come on, dude! What kind of momentum are you talking about there? Just do the maths. It's amazing, It's not a paper plane that somebody threw against the window. That's a lot of momentum.
Yeah. Also, I mean, another one. I mean, these are all part of the conspiracy. I mean, to be perfectly honest, a lot of these just throw questions up, and they're not anything too significant. The one that is odd as well, though, is the one that landed in the Pentagon building.
No, it's really funny.
Yeah, coincidentally, that hit part of the Pentagon that was vacant for renovations, which seemed quite coincidental. Very fortunate, but again, it could happen. But the Pentagon is supposed to be protected regardless. They have, why was the airplane even allowed to get as close as it did? It should have been shot out of the sky way
Because
before.
I don't think they were looking for that kind of an airplane. They weren't looking for a passenger airplane. They were looking for. When people say this, the Pentagon is not on the coast. Okay, it's in freaking Washington, and you'd have thought that if it was a foreign invader, he'd have to get through. He or she, no, he realistically would have to get through past all sorts of security rings and whatnot, and then there'd have been an alert that, look, we've got this foreign aircraft and it's coming in, it's invaded our defense systems, and then you can start getting just there's a passenger plane, everybody be like, and no one 2000 who just wouldn't have crossed anyone's mind. I mean, it was such an outlandish attack that I don't think crossed anyone's mind. It just why?
Also, the picture that they did show, the impact hole was a lot smaller.
That's been explained. One wing, the
wing came off. Port
left. The port wing came off. It was on the left. That hit the ground first. The right wing survived. Survived. Didn't hit the ground, but it went into the building. And by the way, the Pentagon had what had super hardened concrete.
Yeah, I've heard about this.
Yeah, so super hardened concrete. So it hit the building and basically just disintegrated. Leaving a missile shape of the fuselage, which is the shape that you see. So,
but then the same applies. The Twin Towers were designed for all eventualities, including a plane crash.
Yes, including a plane crash, because one had already crashed. No, one had crashed into the Empire State Building.
Yeah.
In 1947.
So they built these buildings to be almost like as indestructible as the Pentagon. So why did it bring the buildings down? This is the whole thing for me. The buildings don't add up.
To be honest, I think they were thinking not of passenger airliners. I think they were thinking more like Cessnas and light aircraft.
But the buildings are designed to withstand that.
No, I'm not. I don't. I'm speculating. So there are things that I believe, and there are things that I speculate about. I don't believe that it was designed this way or that. I'm speculating that the designers would have designed for something like the 1947 Empire State Building crash, when a plane flew into the Empire State Building in a fog.
Okay. But I mean, I'm still of the opinion.
Not a 747 jumbo fully loaded.
Yeah, I know, but even that should not have melted steel.
No, I'd say it didn't. It didn't melt steel. It heated steel. It heated it at 1,400 degrees, which, as I said, is 100 degrees more than is required to make steel buckle.
Also, which was interesting, was the plane engines themselves. I think they were made by Boeing.
Rolls-Royce, surely.
Rolls-Royce, that's it. Rolls-Royce engines. So when the obviously it was discovered what the type of planes were there, the Rolls-Royce engines, Rolls-Royce themselves asked the FBI, could they have their engines back to analyze them? And initially, the American government actually said no, because there's nothing left of them, they're disintegrated. And rumor has it that Rolls-Royce actually laughed at that, because that was incredulous, because it was basically impossible for them not to remain intact. It just, the heat generated would not have vaporized the engines, which is what was being claimed by the American government. Afterwards, they changed their story and said, oh no, they haven't been vaporized, but you can't have them because we're keeping them for our tests. And Rolls-Royce were quite annoyed that they couldn't get hold of their own engines to assess the damage and the speed that hit the building. They weren't even allowed to get their own engines from the plane. The FBI refused them access. Now, I don't know to this day whether they've even been allowed to get hold of their engines, of whatever's left of them, but they were surprised, let's put it that way, use that word, that the American government actually said that they were vaporized, which was just laughable, because that is impossible.
Okay, I don't know about impossible. I know I was looking at the crash of the plane in Pennsylvania, the one that didn't hit any building, the one that the hero plane. The one
yes, the ones that the passengers
and I remember,
down.
and I was looking at the footage, not the footage, the pictures of the wreckage, and it didn't look like anything was there. It really didn't look like anything was there. It was like, so for me, I was looking at it going, where's the plane?
Yeah.
Yeah. And apparently, if you slam into the ground hard enough, yeah, it's not the heat that's going to fragment everything. It's just physics. It's just the momentum of the crash that it fragments and obliterates the aircraft, which I didn't think was possible. I thought, because I've seen lots of pictures of plane crashes. I'm sort of weird in that. It's one of the things I watch, and I scare myself silly next time I'm in a plane. So it's quite silly, really.
Not good to do that, really.
Yeah, but I do it also. I still do it anyway. And I've seen lots and lots of pictures, and they've always been recognizable. The gear with the wheels, those are very hard to destroy. They almost always survive. The engines, like you're saying, and then usually maybe the tail, the sail on the tail. These are things that you expect to see. But then again, I was thinking to myself, in a plane crash, people are trying to save the plane. The pilots are trying not to crash.
Yeah.
So they're doing everything in their power to reduce speed, to bring down the flaps, they're doing everything in their power. So maybe the impact of those aircraft was not the same as the impact of this one, where there was, they were trying to destroy the plane. And I don't think we got enough data, because who does that? So I'm going to put that one on the sort of, 50-50. I'd have expected to see more of the plane than was actually there. Well, there was nothing. There was basically
it was just a burnt out.
A burnt out
seems
shape,
a bit strange.
Which was really, I've never seen anything like that before or since. Not even was it MK? Not MK. The Malaysian one that came down.
Yeah, exactly. That was even hit by a missile.
No, it's hit by a missile. Like,
see, that does you.
And then that came down, and then you looked at it and you think, well, I can recognize a plane in this.
Yeah.
So how come the other one? And by the way, the shape of the airplane was almost like it fell.
Yeah, fell flat down. Yeah,
fell
exactly.
Flat down, and you would think,
rather than skidding along the ground, which is what you would expect.
Unless it's one explanation that I came up with pretty much instantly was that they were fighting, the pilots and the passengers were fighting over the controls, and basically put the plane into a stall. So it fell out of the sky.
Okay, well, if that did happen, you would still not obliterate the plane. You'd still have the engines there.
You see, because if you fall out of the sky, then at certain speeds, bits are going to start falling off. The plane would disintegrate in the air, and you wouldn't land and then leave you a nice little shape of an aircraft,
which is what was there.
So that
really
particular was it Pennsylvania?
Flight 53, I think it was.
Good, well remembered. That one, that's
odd. You see, this is the problem with the whole thing. I'm mindful we're getting close to the top of the hour here, but I mean, there's a lot of if you had one thing that didn't add up, you think, well, okay, you can just dismiss that. But there's so many pieces to this that you think, what is going on? I mean, how on earth? The questions here for that plane crash, the one on the Pentagon, was it shot out the sky even? We don't know. You'd have thought that they would have been able to do something like that. The air defenses, the phone calls from high up above. Who were they phoning to? How could they get a signal? But again, you could dismiss those. The buildings themselves, the way they collapsed on themselves, again, that does not make sense. It just doesn't. They look like controlled explosions because there was even thermite that was found in the rubble at the bottom. And thermite,
I think that was debunked.
why was that debunked?
Okay, I wish I could tell you, and I'm very sorry to our audience members that I can't, because I've forgotten the explanation. I only heard it very recently, and I was dealing with a lot of things. It was in preparation for this show, and I came in late, as you know. So I only heard it this afternoon.
Okay.
There was some reason why that's not the case. It wasn't that thermite was found, I believe. I think it was that they found micro balls of micro
Iron
ball,
or something, yeah.
micro iron, which should only form under thermite,
Yeah.
and then the guy which should only form under temperatures that can be reached by thermite. And the video that I watched said Alex, what's his name? Boyle, the guy with the gas, Boyle's law.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, back in 1670, whatever it was, or whatever. He actually used to make these balls.
Thermite, yeah.
Not thermite. He used to make these
iron balls,
iron micro balls.
Yeah.
And study them under a microscope. And it's easy to do with just flint and iron. You can actually do it. And then there are videos of how it's done, and I'm happy to share the videos. So and if you can use steel wool and a blowtorch. Obviously, don't use your hand. And a blowtorch, you can use steel wool and a blowtorch and create the same thing. So if you, according to this video, if you imagine the temperatures that were reached by the steel pillars and the friction against concrete as the buildings were collapsing, it would create the necessary amount of steel balls that were observed. And again, not a mystery, not thermite. Thermite, by the way, thermite is so hot it produces not just steel balls, but white substance, some kind of oxide that is silvery white. And they said, where was that? If it was thermite, then where is this silvery white oxide thing?
Okay. Interesting. I mean, I'm mindful of the time here, but I mean, just something I want to explain where I mentioned earlier about the news reports that were ahead of time. I mean, I touched on it earlier, of Building 7. I've got the actual thing here, and it looked like the emergency service personnel demonstrated foreknowledge of the building's collapse, but it was 6 mainstream news media outlets that announced live on air that Building 7 had collapsed, some up to an hour before it actually happened. And we have footage which we'll share on our site. It actually says BBC reporter Jane Stanley and separately CNN anchor Aaron Brown both report the collapse of Building 7 ahead of time, despite the fact that you see Building 7 behind them still standing in the background. So both of those announced that they had fallen when the building was clearly still visible on both those 2 news reports live in the background. So it just seemed an hour before it actually fell, which is rather odd for that to happen. Again, not a smoking gun, but peculiar. And this is part of the issues with the whole thing. There's so many inconsistencies and many questions that haven't been answered. That's my line. Do you have a final few words to add, Taya?
I think it's just a murky business, and there are obviously surprises that we have encountered when we look at the story of 9/11. But I don't think I find anything which definitely points to a conspiracy, and I don't know why anyone would have done that. It would have been enough to have flown one aircraft into one of the twin towers, and that would have been sufficient to, for to trigger America. I don't think you needed to see what we did see. So I think they were just genuine terrorists who just carried out a terrorist attack.
Okay, interesting. I do think that is my personal view is that is what happened, but by looking at this topic, there are a lot of unanswered questions that have actually clouded my judgment in terms of what went on, and these questions do need answering because they're lingering even now, 20 years past the anniversary, and we still haven't got an answer. And
they'll never be answered.
Well, indeed, and it does throw questions which, because the whole point after it changed America's philosophy in terms of not philosophy, it empowered them to go after whoever they wanted. Also, the Patriot Act was introduced immediately after, and that way everybody signed up to it, which gave the American government access to a lot of information that the people before hadn't shared with them. So there was a lot of things. You became a patriot by doing it. And so there was a lot of things under the hood that went forward after this that increased the US's international agenda. And maybe, if you want to look at it from a conspiracy point of view, it was the catalyst to reinforce that and speed it up, perhaps. But certainly questions need to be asked as to why certain things happened in the way they did. Because to me, it is not fully answered.
Good luck with that.
Indeed. But unfortunately, we have reached the end of the show for another week.